Hi guys, one of the most common questions that we get is how much should I be watering my plants? So I'm going to try to explain it with my wonderful artwork, and I'm not an artist as we all know. I'm going to try to explain it on this so you'll know how much that you need to be giving how much water to be giving your flowers. So you go shopping, you buy your flower, you come home and you've got this large container, your large clay pot or your large ceramic container, and you bring your flower home and you're setting it into your container. We're going to pretend like this flower is a lot larger than it really is. But anyhow, you set it in here and you've got this large container with all of the soil. Well, the first thing you don't want to do is you don't want to water down inside of there a whole bunch and get it all soaked and then set your flower in there and then water some more. You're going to have that way too wet. Just, if you're going to water a little bit inside of it first, just give it a little bit. Stick it down in there and put your soil around it, water it a little bit more. Your goal for the size of your flower, for the size of your container, is to water just a little bit beyond your root system. So this is your root system right here. You're going to water a little bit beyond the root system. I know sometimes that's kind of hard to judge, but just kind of, feel around in there with your fingers and you'll kind of get used to that part. One thing that you can do is if you reach in there and you pull out some soil and you squeeze it and water's just dripping out, then you've probably got your container way too wet. And the same thing is if you pull out some soil and it's kind of falling apart, then most likely it needs just a little bit more. It needs to stay together a little bit, but not necessarily way down in here. This does not. You're not worried about this. You're only worried about the soil that is just surrounding that plant. You don't want too much water and you don't want too little of water. If you have a small plastic container, something like this, and you squeeze on it and water just comes dripping out the bottom, or even just a few little drops start coming out the bottom, you've got that too wet. One thing that you can do is, if you get it too wet, is take a pencil or something like a long wooden spoon and start poking some holes in it to aerate it, get some air holes in there. And another thing you can do is, and this is if you've got smaller pots where you can actually do this, but you can pull it or tip it upside down, pull it out and look and see how wet this is down inside here. And you can see that this geranium's not soaking wet down inside there. I don't want those roots to lay soggy wet. Now this is starting to get a pretty good root system, so I definitely want it to stay damp down in here, but all flowers, all plants need a dry wet cycle. So they want to have some dryness and then they want to get wet again. But again, not soppy wet. Here's a hanging basket. I don't have the hooks on it yet, but let's say you're starting your own hanging baskets. Whenever you put those down inside of there, you don't, like I said, you don't want to get this all soppy wet because they're not very big yet. What you can do, what I would do, is I would just water around each one of the plants that you have in there. You don't need to water all of this way out in here. You can see that right now this plant, we don't have a lot of wet soil all through this whole thing. I'm just basically worried right now about the actual plant. So when I go along and I take my hose or my water can or whatever, I'm just going to water around each one of these plants, keeping in mind about what the depth is of each one of these. Now, as this starts to get bigger, the more foliage that you have on a plant, the more water that it's going to take. So that's how you're going to pay attention to how do I know when this is getting big down in here? Well, how big is it up here? The bigger it's getting up here, the more roots you're getting down here. And again, if you can tip it upside down, you can see your root system, then you'll know how much more water you should be giving it. Keep an eye on your plants every single day. Are they getting too much water, not enough water, too much sun, not enough sun, too much wind? Keep an eye on them every single day so that you know what it is that they need. You'll have a happier, healthier plant.